So now we are going to see how we can make HTTP requests. Okay. For that, we are going to create another class here, and that is going to be HTTP example.tsx. Okay, as usual, we are going to import the basic classes we are going to use. From React, and I'm going to use the class name as export default class HTTP example extends component. Okay, and for now I'm just going with any and any, but I will come back and review this. And I need to use the render method. This is going to be a trigger class kind of, in order to load the main implemented component. Okay, return. This should return a component. Okay, so here I'm going to use class users. Okay, or users component. Okay, and this also is going to use prop and state. Okay, so in order to use this, we need a real-time, we are going to use a real-time API. Okay, for that we can go to our browser and we can search for JSON placeholder dot typicode or typicode.com. Okay, we can scroll down, and here we can see there are many JSON placeholder or many API examples. We can try them for free. Okay, and if you scroll down further, okay, so here we are seeing some resources section. Okay, and here we have the users. Okay, it specifies that it has 10 users. So when we click on this users, so it is pointing us to the domain name /users. Okay, and it instantly returned us this JSON array. Okay, so it has 10 objects as it had specified earlier. Okay, so we are going to call this API and load the data that we are receiving from here. Okay, and in order to simplify things, so we are going to use only these 4 fields. Okay, because when we use address, so it would add up more code into that, and that would add up extra time on this section as well. So let's keep this thing simple to the point. Okay, so we are going to use ID, name, username, and email. Let's come back to our code and let's create a type, and I'm going to name this as a user. It had an ID. Let's see the type case, all lowercase. ID as number, and name is going to be string. Username is going to be string as well, and so would be email. Okay, let's use this as semicolon, not commas. Let's verify if we have the right casing. ID, name, username, and email. ID, name, username, and email. Perfect. And then we are going to create the state example for this component. Okay, so we are going to have or type state. Okay, and this will have users, and this is going to be an array of users. Okay, and then we are going to pass this to this component. Okay, so now we are going to initialize this component. Okay, and we would be doing that inside the constructor. Okay, this is expecting a props. We already have specified that we are going to use any. The same we are going to specify here as well. Okay, then we are going to initialize the state with the default values, and that is going to be an object that should have users with empty data. Okay, we also need to make sure that these are all optional so that we can avoid the compilation issues for now. Okay, and this also no, this, I think it's better if this is having some data. Okay, so I'm saving this, and now it's time to print this thing. Okay, so we would be using a table that is going to be a very basic one. Table, we should have the header, tr, the first one is going to be id, and next one we have name, next one we have username, and the next we have email. So this was all about the header, and then we are going to use the t-body. Okay, so the t-body is going to contain the data that we would be populating here, and that data is going to come from this state. Okay, so the idea is we would be making an API call to, okay, and when we receive the data from the API, we would be populating this state, okay, with the list of users that we have received from the API. So we have to write our code in such a way that it should be, you know, capable of doing the same. Okay, so here we need to print only the table rows along with the table data. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to have another function here, and this function is going to return the table rows. Okay, print user, this is going to take user type. Okay, and okay, that's the problem, so I have to place this outside, my bad. So, and this is going to return a component, and that component is going to be a table row, and this table row is going to have table data. Okay, and we are going to have 4 table datas. Inside this td, we are going to print the values we would be getting from the argument. Let's format this in a better way so that it's easier to read. This is going to have, come on, let's copy this thing so that we can just replace the fields, name, and then username, and then we have the email. So now we are going to call this print user, okay, inside this t-body. How we do that? We do it just like this, or print user. Not like this, because we would be using the state. Okay, dot state dot users dot map, and inside this map we are going to pass the print user function. Okay, so this is what we have, the function. So this is going to print the user. Okay, so just to check if everything is working fine, I'm going to pass in a dummy object here, ID as, let's say, 100, name is Robert, and username as Rob123, and email as rob1234@mymail.com. Okay, let's save this, and in order to link this, we have to return this now, users component. Okay, and we also have to link this HTTP example class in index.tsx as well. So I'm going to replace the earlier line with HTTP example. Okay, let's save this. Let's go back to our example. So it seems we have some rendering issue. It is printing the data 100 Robert Rob123 and the email, but it's doing it in a different way. Why is that? Let's go back to our class. Because of this. So it should be TD. Okay, so this is fixed. Let's save this and let's go back to our UI. Okay, so we have this properly printed now. ID, name, username, and email 100. The name is Robert Rob123, and the username and email we have. Okay, so this is fine. Now we are going to trigger the API. Okay, for that we are going to JSON placeholder.typicode.com, and let's go to the users URL that we would be hitting. Okay, I have copied the URL. Okay, coming back to our code, and inside this users component, I'm going to have field value here, and that is going to be URL equals this. Okay, this is a string type. So note that here we are using a instance variable, but the only purpose of this instance variable is to use a read-only value. Okay, so only in such cases we can use instance variables. Otherwise, if you are going to use any kind of data that is, having chances of, getting changed, so better use the state. Okay, so and this is the URL we are going to hit. All right, and we are going to use another function here. Okay, get users. Okay, and oh, let's use that as a variable. Sorry, I missed that. We can do the same thing for this. Okay, let's copy this. Let's move this inside. Let's remove the function. That's it. And get users. So as part of this, we are going to call, or we are going to use the fetch API. In TypeScript or JavaScript, we have this fetch API which is used for calling APIs. Okay, I'm going to use this fetch. Fetch is a function, and we are going to pass the arguments here. The first argument is going to be the URL that we would be calling, and then it's going to take the additional parameters usually contain the method kind of things. For get, this is not necessary. I just wanted to show you that in case if you needed a post request, so in that case this additional parameters would be very much helpful. Okay, so application type and etc. Then authentication tokens you can pass inside this object. Okay, and then we are calling this fetch. This fetch is going to return a promise object. Okay, and promise object is kind of asynchronous. Okay, sorry, I noticed that now. Okay, promise is kind of asynchronous, and we are going to have this handled. We have to call then. So when promise is going to be resolved, then this then method is going to be called. Okay, so inside this then I'm going to use the variable. This can be anything, so it doesn't necessarily has to be response. It can be any name you can probably use. Okay, so inside this response, so I'm going to call JSON. So again, in response object, JSON is asynchronous, or JSON also returns another promise. Okay, so we need to handle it properly. Okay, for on this call, again we are going to call then. Okay, now we are going to have the user. So we need to use the data properly. Okay, or I'm going to use this new users, and I'm going to give them the type as user array. Okay, and then I'm going to handle this inside this code block. Okay, so then I'm going to update this state, set state as users and new users. Okay, let's save this, and in order to invoke this we might need a button. Okay, for that button I think let's put the whole thing inside a div so that we can encapsulate both the table and the button in the same window, or in the same tag. At the button we have this, at the bottom we have this button. Okay, and I'm going to give the name as load users. Okay, and then on click I want to invoke the get users. So since we are going to update the state as part of this, we are going to bind this inside the constructor. Okay, I think we have pretty much covered. Okay, let's try this thing. So this is the previous data we have. Now when I click on load users, see, immediately it loaded. First name Leanne Graham, and the username is Brett, and email is sincere@april.biz. Let's see the JSON we had earlier. Yes, this is the one, Leanne Graham. Okay, so this is how it is loading the data. Okay, we can click on this again, it will probably load the same data again, or you can probably place another button right next to it just to clean this data. Okay. On click, now we are going to need a new function here, clear users, and this is exactly what we are going to do. Let's go to our constructor, bind off this, save this. Let's come back. Now we have both the buttons. Let's do the clear first. So now the previous data is gone now. Now let's click on load users. Immediately we have the users. Okay. Again, click clear the users. It's cleared. Okay. Load users. So this is how it is loading the data. Let me show you on the console as well. Okay. Warning, each child in a list key should have a unique key prop. So in order to resolve this, let's go to our component, and here instead of passing this, we need to use the key value. So the key value I'm going to use here is key is user.id. This should be it. Let's save this. Okay, come back, see the warning is gone. Let's clear this dummy user and load users. See, this thing is clear. Now let's go to network tab. Okay, so we already had a lot of queries. Let me clear these and clear this data as well. And now let's load users all over again. You see, it has made the request to http://jsonplaceholder.tpcode.com/users. Okay, so if I click on this and then click on this response, so see, this is the data it has resulted, and this is the same that we have printed, but it's just that we have printed only 4 fields of what we are actually getting from the API. Okay, so this is pretty much we have on the HTTP. Actually, there's much more to it. The idea is to just get a hands-on on how exactly we can trigger API requests in React component. Okay, so that's all we have as part of HTTP for this session. See you in the next one.